go birding with Guido. We were fortunate to go birding with Guido twice in 2014 and again this past October. And his passion for birds, protecting habitat, and promoting conservation in Panama is contagious. But I'm going to let Guido tell you all about that. The many projects he's been involved in to help protect Panama's migrant and neotropic birds is inspirational. And I expect that after you listen to him, you will want to book a trip to Panama and help with the conservation efforts there. So I present to you our awesome speaker for tonight, Guido Berguido.
Hey, thank you so much, Bunny. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Those from outside of Conejo Audubon, thank you so much for joining us, and hi to everybody. Happy New Year. Feliz Año Nuevo. This is very special for me, and thanks for Bunny for coming up with this initiative. It's my great pleasure to talk to you a little bit about this wonderful place called Panama. So some of you have visited us before, but you'd be surprised to learn that even though we're a tiny little country, roughly the size of South Carolina, we have more bird species than all of the US and Canada combined. So imagine in that tiny little place, and you put together over 1,015 species of birds, and that's Panama. So for the first, I'll do my very best effort to talk to you as succinctly as possible, briefly, because there's so much we can talk about, but I'll do my very best to talk to you a little bit about why Panama has got such immense diversity of wildlife, and at the same time, how I became from a regular bird watcher like yourselves, perhaps, into a conservationist, because I couldn't stand to watch the habitat being destroyed where our birds were living. So I'll talk to you a little bit about that, and then all the progress. For those of you who have heard this story before, you're gonna learn a little bit about what are some of the more recent activities we have been doing in Panama. So first, I would like to tell you, well, here's where Panama is. For those of you who haven't been here, this is our lovely country of Panama, right in between Colombia and Costa Rica, there in Central America. The thing is that Panama and a lot of the countries in the region, in the neotropics and the tropics in general, have the ideal conditions for diversity to flourish for wildlife. You know, the temperature, humidity, rainfall. We have almost 12 hours of daylight throughout the year, whether it's the winter or the summer. Almost always we'll have 12 hours of rain. So that's very ideal for plants to flourish in different sizes, colors, dimensions. And of course, we will have the birds that all the wildlife also, of course. If you like butterflies, if you like damselflies, dragonflies, if you like frogs, if you like sloths, you would certainly be surprised to learn how many species of mammals we have in our tiny little country of Panama, right? The jaguar being the king of the jungle, if you wish, one of the most massive birds. I mean, and one of the most impressive birds is certainly a vulture, believe it or not. This is a king vulture that some of you may have seen when you're down here. Most certainly our most symbolic bird is the national bird of Panama. This is the harpy eagle, the most powerful bird of prey in the world. That stands about 6 feet tall. I mean, 5 feet tall and 6 feet in wingspan. It's a humongous little bird. And of course, we have a whole array of hummingbirds. They're a great example of diversity here in Panama. We have just over 65 different species of hummingbirds in Panama, different sizes, tiny. Some of them are tiny, like this violet-bellied hummingbird. Some are bigger, like the violet saberwing that I showed you earlier. But they come together wherever there's food. And here in our backyard in Gamboa, some of you who've been here in the canal area, we have about 15 species of hummingbirds in our yard. So it's really impressive. And that's because we have so many different flowers of different sizes, colors, shapes, and forms that are available throughout the year, which is the important part that allows for hummingbirds to specialize on different kinds of flowers and different kinds of habitats. And while I mentioned that, it's important that you realize that one of the other reasons we have so many birds in Panama is that we have different kinds of ecosystems. So not all of Panama is just rainforest as such, but we have different kinds of rainforest based on the amount of rainfall, humidity, and so on. So this is a kind of a semi-deciduous forest, and there's some other that are humid forest, wet forest, and so on. But what's interesting is that each of these different kinds of forests has unique birds. This is a landsdale manakin that's more typically found in like scrubby habitats. We have, of course, wetlands where you can find a whole series of other birds like this anhinga, this kingfisher, even this straight-billed wood creeper that is typically found in mangroves in wetlands. Another reason is that Panama is right at the junction of the Americas, which means that we get the best of both worlds. And we also get like we act as a funnel because the isthmus is so narrow that all of your migratory species heading down to South America, they must come together and congregate here in Panama. This is a prothonotary warbler. And of course, we have raptors aplenty. We have millions of raptors that come through Panama on their journeys to South America. We of course have the great blue heron that migrates down to Panama and a little bit further. But we also get the cocoy heron, which is a South American species from the Amazon that ventures barely into Panama, just over the canal zone. It doesn't occur anywhere else north of Panama. Same with this other beautiful cat heron. That's another Amazonian bird that makes of Panama the northernmost end of the range. We also have a bunch of islands. This is a beautiful photo of Escudo de Veraguas Island, which is right there at in the yellow circle here in the Western Caribbean side of Panama. And some of these islands are so far away that they have evolved a whole series of wildlife unique to them. Believe it or not, there's a sloth species, the pygmy sloth. It's found only in this island and nowhere else in the world. So is the case of this little hummingbird that is called Escudo hummingbird, and it's endemic or unique to this particular island in Western Panama. Okay, another reason that Panama has so many bird species is that this is a topographical map, and you can notice that there's a bunch of mountains, okay? So the mountains create different habitats at cooler temperatures. Believe it or not, our highest mountain out there to the far west or to the left side of the photo of the map of Panama, we have Baru volcano, which rises to about 11,000 feet. And at those elevations, temperature changes dramatically. It can almost be like near freezing at night. But these mountains also become a barrier separating species from one side, like the Caribbean side, versus the Pacific side that are from the lowlands and are separated by the mountains. So it's amazing. But in the cloud forest is what we call this type of vegetation up in the mountains is really unique. And the birds diversity is also unique to this cloud forest. This is a white-ruffed manakin. This is a bay-headed tanager. And one of our favorite birds, of course, is the resplendent quetzal, one of the most beautiful birds in the world. It's found in the western mountains of Panama. And so in my search for all these very rare birds, because even though I've been birding for like 25 years or so, I have not seen every single bird in Panama. I have only seen maybe like 800 species of the 1,015 species that they are recorded in Panama. So back in 2004, I was trying to search different parts of the country where I hadn't seen many birds. And that's what attracted me to the mountains near Colombia, in the area of the Darien. It turns out that because of the lack of accessibility, you may have heard of the Darien Gap. The Darien Gap is the only interruption of the Pan American Highway that would otherwise allow you to drive from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego in South America. But it doesn't go through the Darien because it's a thick rainforest. So it was very difficult to get there. And that's when I noticed that there was this one mountain called Cerro Chucanti, which is the name of our project, there in that rectangle there in yellow. That's where it's located, right at the borderline between Panama province and the Darien province. When we went there for the first time, it wasn't very easy at all. It was very difficult. It took us over a day just to get there, but we were very impressed to find very rare species like this Colombian spider monkey. That's a critically endangered species. We also found acorns that for you, perhaps it's very common, but for us in Panama, it's something completely unusual, because in the tropical lowland rainforest, we don't usually have acorns, okay? And it's funny because when we have our presentations in front of like high schools or middle schools, they don't relate to acorns. We have to make the connection so they realize where they're coming from when we talk about this movie, this called The Ice Age. And when we talk about this cartoon movie, The Ice Age, then they make a connection with acorns, which is very unusual here in Panama. We of course found in this mountain when I first went there, a number of species that I had never seen, a number of life firsts for me in that case. So I was very excited. But at the same time, some of these birds, like this golden-headed manakin that we saw in Chucanti in the mountain, attracted a lot of our attention because these are typically South American birds and some are endemic birds. So when I came back to the city and told my friends and my birding colleagues about these beautiful birds that I had seen, they all wanted to come and see it. So when one of them really wanted to see this golden-headed manakin, so I told him that it wasn't going to be a problem at all because I remember exactly where they had their lek, their territory where they would display. So, and he made me promise that I would show them this bird because I told him that I had seen the lek where they were displaying. So we show up a few weeks later, like a month later, and I took him exactly to the place where I had seen this beautiful golden-headed manakin. But when we got there, we didn't see the manakin, and instead we got to see this. The locals had clear cut and burnt this whole patch of forest where the manakins were previously hanging out. So after a little bit of sadness, of course, my friend said I couldn't believe it. Well, it's basically because the locals still practice slash and burn agriculture for subsistence practice, basically, no? So, but later we went on further into the Chucanti area and we were very excited because we encountered these insects. These are army ants. And for those of you who have had the opportunity to come to the tropics, when you find army ant swarms, that's very special because you get to see a lot of birds. There's a bunch of birds that are called ant birds, like this bicolored ant bird, spotted ant bird. All these birds come together where the ants are moving through so they can take advantage of all the insects that are escaping the ants. So we also find with the ant swarm, we also found wood creepers like this one. And even I found one back then that was a lifer for me. This is a ruddy wood creeper that I had never seen before in my life. So I was super excited. But later when we kept on following the ants were crawling over a hilltop. And what we saw over there was this scene like this. They had, again, burnt and clear cut another patch of forest so they could do their farming. So the following day, when we were sitting in this lush cloud forest, talking about all these cool birds that we were seeing, and but at the same time, we were pretty upset about the destruction that we were witnessing. My friend that was with me, he's an ornithologist from Canada, David Bradley. He says, "Hey Guido, why don't we do something about this? Why don't you just buy this land from the farmers so they don't have to cut it down?" At first, I thought it was joking because I don't come from a very wealthy family. My name is Guido Berguido, not Rockefeller or any of those fancy names. So I thought I couldn't do anything about it. But when you have 4 or 5 hours sitting on a horse, you have a lot of time to think. So I started wondering during those long 4 hours on a horse, what if we could do something about it? So I asked our local guide if he knew who owned that piece of land. And that's when I met Mr. Julian Zarzavilla. And he was the owner of that land we were visiting. So I explained to him how excited we were to come visit his place and all the cool birds and wildlife we were finding. But at the same time, we told him that we were very upset because we saw how they were cutting down the forest. Well, to sum up the story as much as possible, we eventually convinced him that we really wanted to protect the forest to the point that we'd be willing to buy the land from him. So he said that he owned 100 acres of rainforest. And at first I was pretty concerned because that's a lot of land, 100 acres. But then I was surprised to learn that he wanted only $7,000 to sell me his 100 acres of property in the Chucanti mountain. So that was okay. I was excited with the possibility of buying that. But when I came back a couple of weeks later, that we had agreed to do this deal, I learned that he wasn't going to sell me the land at that moment, but instead he had decided to sell a logging concession in the property to later sell me the land. And so a couple of weeks later, we go back there and we actually witnessed them cutting down the trees. They were hauling out trees. And as a matter of fact, I have a recording that I want to play for you of some of the frogs and birds that we were listening to. And listen what you hear in the background. You hear some frogs, perhaps, yes. But more than the frogs, I'm sure you can hear the chainsaws, because we noticed them clear cutting the trees in the reserve, in the property that we're about to buy. And we were talking about humongous trees that were 200-300 years old, and it was really amazing that they were cutting them down. So, of course, we couldn't stand that, because the whole point that was trying to buy these 100 acres of land was to protect the rainforest. So when we went back down to the village, we asked him that they needed to stop cutting down the trees. And that's when we learned that he had sold the logging concession to cut down 200 of these beautiful trees. And they had clear cut already, or cut down already 30 of them, and there were still 170 trees left to be cut. So needless to say, I say, wait a minute, we won't let this happen. We have to stop this one way or another. And so Mr. Julian, the property owner, told us that there wasn't much he could do, because he had already sold the logging concession and they already paid him and he had spent the money. So we went on to talk to the loggers, and after like an hour or so of trying to convince him to stop cutting down the trees, the loggers said, well, if you pay me back for every one of those trees that I haven't cut down yet, they're yours to keep. So the big question became, how much did you have to pay for each of those 100 or 200 trees altogether? Well, guess how much? At first, I was very surprised. I was very concerned, because if he had told me that he'd paid $1,000 or $500 for each of those 200 trees, I wouldn't have been able to afford it. But to my surprise, and yours as well, he only paid $12 per tree. Imagine, $12 for each of these humongous trees. So at first I was in shock. I couldn't believe that these people were crazy enough to destroy this gorgeous vegetation and all the plants and epiphytes and orchids and birds that nest and live on this tree for just $12. But after I got over that shock, I said, hell, I'll buy them all. And I was able to buy each of those 170 trees that were remaining. And that's when we were able to protect or buy the property. And with some of the lumber that was already on the ground that they had cut down, we built one little field station that some of you have actually visited. And we started receiving visitors and scientists to come. And to our surprise, turns out that this particular mountaintop, this cloud forest, is not just special for the birds, but there are many other species that are interesting and unique. And that is the case of this little spider. I'm not sure if you like spiders, but this is we found it just outside our cabin, and it turned out to be a brand new spider never seen before by scientists. And it was called Strophaeus sebastianii. Later, one of our colleagues, Dr. Abel Batista, found this beautiful salamander in the cloud forest, and turned out to be also a new species, and he called it Bolitoglossa chucantiensis. And little by little, every single specialist, every single biologist that came to this property, to this reserve, started finding something interesting. As a matter of fact, we started telling this story to other people, and some of our fellow bird watchers, some of our travelers started contributing to these efforts. And what started as a single 100-acre property later became 300, 400, 800. And later we've been able to access grants from international foundations. And this very special area, now we've protected over 12 properties that adds up to about 1,500 acres of rainforest. And even more interesting, we keep finding new species to science. That is the case of this centipede snake that they call Guido Berguido, and this beautiful bird of paradise relative, Heliconia, that Mr. Rodolfo Flores, the botanist who sold him the specimen there, he called it Heliconia Berguidoi, basically to honor our initial efforts to protect this beautiful forest. So all in all, ADOPTA is the name of organization that currently administers and protects the Chucanti, what we call now the Chucanti Private Nature Reserve. And we have agreements with the Ministry of Government, with the Ministry of Environment, with the local authorities. So they join us. We hired a couple of rangers to patrol the property. And we also oftentimes require the assistance of local authorities, like these police from the ecological police and the border police, that we have some sort of agreement, and we have these activities where we invite also lawyers and biologists to it's like an exchange program, but it's very effective at deterring poaching and logging inside the property. So of course, we keep going to different schools and universities, previously pre-pandemic more so, nowadays more virtually, through our social media and Zoom, like we are here today. So a lot of people get very enthusiastic about our efforts to preserve the rainforest. So they want to get involved. We have a group of like 200 volunteers, and we also invite local universities, schools, and corporations even to join us on various environmental activities like reforestations, beach cleanups, habitat restoration, both with individual schools and also with companies like in the various banks and other companies that join us in corporate volunteers. So basically, that's how we all started doing this effort. And Adopta Bosque, the name you see there, is the name of our social media. If you want to learn more about these interesting efforts, you can go online and check this out. But I wanted to tell you a little bit more about one of our most recent projects that we're starting. And for those of you that haven't been in touch for a couple of years, this is new to you. We started monitoring raptor migration in Western Panama, in Bocas del Toro. I told you already that through Panama come millions of raptors, but there are not many places where in the world where this occurs. As a matter of fact, there are only 5 places in the world that get close to 2 million migratory raptors. Of course, you may have heard of River of Raptors in Veracruz, Mexico. You've heard of perhaps Tecoldi in Costa Rica. You may have heard of Eilat in Israel. There's Cerro Ancon right here in Panama City. And the 5th one becomes then Bocas del Toro in Western Panama. This is Carl Barden, who's originally from Duluth, Minnesota. He's a very experienced hawk watcher there. And he was invited by a local hotel to check out the migration at their facilities. And well, we had been looking for a location to do monitoring ourselves as ADOPTA. So we tagged along and started developing this relationship. We hired some local volunteers or interns to assist us in the monitoring. This is Chelina Batista, our scientific coordinator. And boy, did we find a lot of birds. Some of these you may recognize. Anybody? These are Swainson's hawks and turkey vultures that are the most numerous or most abundant birds that we recorded. And we're very excited because we're also involving indigenous girls to become hawk counters with us. And that's what we want to promote even more so in this area of Bocas del Toro. There are 3 different indigenous tribes in that province. And of course, they have a very hard time making a living or learning about the rainforest because they take it for granted. So it's very exciting for us to show them a different scene, that these thousands and thousands and millions of raptors that come over their heads are very special in a worldwide context. So some of the kids, some of the local, this is Chelina at the Hawk Ridge Hotel and Residences overlooking the Caribbean there. And boy, were we impressed by the number of birds we found. These are our tally total for just 2 months of observations. In between October and November, we found close to 2 million raptors, 1,992,183 raptors migrating through Panama, including 1.2 turkey vultures, nearly 400,000 Swainson's hawks, 273,000 broadwing hawks, We got late for Mississippi kites, so we only got 47 hook-billed kites and other raptors. So again, we were very excited to start this monitoring program that is one of the only 5 places in the entire world that approaches 2 million raptors during a single season. So basically, we want to thank all of the supporters, all the organizations that have contributed with our efforts, the Whitman Foundation, the Rainforest Trust, the International Conservation Fund of Canada, the International Union for Conservation of Nature in Holland, and Palos Verdes South Bay Audubon that did a very interesting effort a couple of years ago and is still supporting us in various activities of ours to support the conservation of habitat and hiring rangers to protect this interesting location. And of course you. So there are many ways you may think or you could contribute. The first one is to tell others about this interesting project. You can tell them that you heard about this crazy fellow in Panama that's trying to protect the rainforest and the birds. So they can follow us on social media to learn more about it at ADOPTA Bosque. And you can travel to Panama and other rainforest countries using local companies. That way you may contribute more to the local economies, and that has a direct impact on habitat conservation, because the more people that we have around here, the greater the economic impact that it contributes, that people will start noticing that there are more people that value the rainforest and the birds. Of course, there's also the opportunity to name some species. In Cerro Chucanti, this mountain, we have discovered over 56 new species of birds, wildlife in general, orchids, salamanders, snakes, frogs, you name it. And we're always looking for donors that will be willing to help us describe them, because we have only described about maybe 14 of these species. And that means that we have more than 40 species that we haven't gotten around to describing or naming, because it takes funding to do that. You need to hire a scientist to do the research, and it takes a year or two to do this work. And you have to travel and collect samples and do molecular studies and such. And that's all very expensive. Even just publishing it in a journal costs thousands of dollars. So we always need all the support we can get. And of course, if you want to come down and volunteer in one of our activities, you're welcome to do so. If you want to spend a couple of months down here in Panama helping us protect the rainforest, you're more than welcome to do so. And this thanks to Jonathan, that's around here from Orange County in California. He helped set up this interesting Gofundme campaign that we want to raise funds to follow up with this hawk watch in Bocas del Toro, where we had almost 2 million birds. And because we would like to offer the interns that work with us, especially the indigenous girls and the indigenous people, we want to offer them a little stipend. And believe it or not, something as little as, I don't know, a couple $100 to them, it makes a world of difference, because they have very little income. So thank you so much to Jonathan for putting this together. And we're hoping that we can raise some more funding to keep this place going for this next spring, and perhaps even the fall migration. So thank you so much, everybody. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to take them. You can turn on your mics, I think, if you want to say something.
Well, Guido, we can certainly continue support, and anybody who wants to make a tax-deductible donation in addition to this Support Bocas del Toro project can make a donation through Palos Verdes South Bay Audubon, because we've been doing that. We're set up to take donations and pass them through, and they become tax deductible since it's a donation to an Audubon chapter.
Super, thank you so much, Jess. If you want some more information, you can look us up on social media at ADOPTA Bosque, or you can just go on GoFundMe and look up Bocas del Toro Hawk Watch, and you can just contribute $10, $20, whatever. You can treat us to a cup of coffee or a meal, and you'd be surprised how much it makes of a difference. Thank you,
Guido,
Jess.
could you tell us how much money it costs to have a ranger up there to patrol? And how much money does it take to actually name a particular species? Just
Thank
give
you
us
so
a
much.
ballpark.
Yes. Well, that's very good point, because a lot of the organizations we've been working for, we've been very fortunate to get their support to purchase more rainforest for conservation. They're very happy to help us buy the land, but sometimes they're not as keen on supporting us pay salaries for the rangers that patrol it. And that's very important, because if you buy it and don't patrol it, you have poachers, you have loggers, you have squatters coming in, and that defeats the whole point. And to answer your question, it costs us around, I don't know, $650 a month. So let me do the math. So to give you the exact figure, 600 roughly 50 times plus vacations plus salary, this, we're talking about $9,000 a year to keep one ranger in place, a little bit over $9,000. And we have two. We used to have three, but because of the pandemic, and since we rely a lot on income from ecotourism, and with COVID, we don't have much tourism anymore. We had to let one go, and well, hope we don't have to let another one go if we get enough support. But yes.
So what would be the ideal number for you to?
At least 4, because like for instance, right now we had 2, and one of them is in vacation, like mandatory vacation. So we just have the one guy taking care of 1,500 acres, and that's very difficult. And to answer your question about the species project, normally our goal to name a species to honor somebody that you care about, $15,000 would be the ideal, because that way not only do we cover the publication expenses and the researcher that does the investigation and all the studies, but we also are able to give a scholarship to some Panamanian biologists that they can become more proficient at doing field work, and help us pay a little bit of like a couple of months of salary for the rangers, at least 6 months. So, and by the way, I have to congratulate Jess Morton, who's here, and you, Avi, who were kind enough to donate a new species of calla lily that was discovered in Chucantí, and is called nowadays Dieffenbachia mortoniana, thanks to Jess Morton and Eddie Meyer. Thanks so much.
And actually, just to highlight that, Guido, I just put a link into the chat along with the GoFundMe that shows the new species that have been officially described from Cerro Chucantí up to this point. It's only 16, and as Guido said, there's well over 50 that we're actually looking to name at some point. But if you're looking at the ones that are official, they're all on that page for you if you want to check it out. Super. And yeah, thanks for posting the link. So if you want to treat us to a coffee and donate $15 to the donation to the Bocas del Toro Hawk Watch, that would be lovely. And yeah, it's very interesting project. It's just an example of how an initiative that started with just myself can turn into a very interesting movement with lots of people supporting, and we can really make a world of difference. If you have any other questions, I'll be more than happy.
We might talk about your most recent naming effort.
No. Depending which one. By the way, we're going to publish a new species of frog this next week. One of our donors from the Rainforest Trust paid for the naming rights, and we're going to name a new species of rain frog from Chucantí after, this is how we call it, the news, hot off the press, or not even, still in the press. It's going to be called Greta Thunberg, after the climate activist. That's what he decided to do. So once again, thank you so much to the Conejo Valley Audubon Society. Bonnie, thanks for making this happen. Thanks to all of you who tuned in from different parts of the country. It was very nice to see you all from Seattle, from LA area. All you guys, thanks, Jonathan, Avi, Jess, to join us. Awesome.
Guido, can you explain the difference between hiring local companies for birding guides versus not hiring local companies?
Well, that's it's a matter of preference for sure. I mean, people sometimes like to feel comfortable with some of the names that they recognize already with some of the big birding tour companies. But you need to realize that, as you can probably guess, that a big chunk of what you pay goes to the US-based company. And if you go directly to a local company like us here with ADOPTA or Advantage, you'll be putting all the money directly in the country. So that makes a world of difference to you and to us and to everybody. But either way, it'd be great if you can come down and visit us. And if you travel with me in particular, here in Panama, you can rest assured that most of the funding will go directly to, most of the proceeds will go directly to conservation, which is what we've been doing for the last 18 years.
And I have to say, having birded with you, Guido, it is one of the most exciting things that, I mean, it's going on. This man never stops. And he's got the ears and the eyes to find these birds. You are in the very, very best hands to bird with Guido. Highly recommended.
Thank you. Very kind. Well,
I want to just also say, if Guido isn't the guide, he has friends, employees, colleagues that guide you. We were there in October and November, and for 10 days we were with Guido and his company, and Hakubo was our guide. And we went there with a goal of seeing a harpy eagle, and we did, and we saw some other amazing life birds. And it was easy to find his company. If you go to countries and you search for local companies, it works. And we had an amazing Panama experience and learned a lot about conservation there. Thank you to Guido.
Super, thank you so much. Yeah, and you learn not only about the birds, but about the culture and anything that you want to know about the country. Of course, we're here, so we are in very good position to share all this knowledge with you guys. So, well, if there are any other questions, I'll stay in touch.
I was going to say, I have a question.
Yes,
So
Carol.
the rainforest, approximately 1,000 acres, how long would it take to travel from that to the Hawk Watch site? What type? I'm not very familiar with Panama at all,
Yes.
but
Well, they're in completely different parts of the country. They're
Right.
completely opposite sides of the country. Even though in the future, I mean, we would love to monitor the migration at our place or near our place in the Darien province, which is where we are near Colombia. But so far, we're finding that they're very concentrated near Costa Rica, sorry, in the west. So they're quite in the opposite parts of the country. Yes.
but how long would it, if one wanted to
Oh,
go to
wow.
both places, and let's say you did the unthinkable and did not stop to bird along the way, maybe had a brief lunch, what type of time are we taking to travel that distance?
We would never do it that way because it's, you know, but if you were to drive nonstop from Chucanti Mountain to Bocas del Toro, it would be like 15 hours drive.
Oh my, okay.
Yes. And it's not because it's too far, but instead it's because it's windy roads and you have to go up and down across the divide from the Pacific to the Atlantic, even though it's only a couple, like 100 miles perhaps. No, less than 100 miles. It's like 70 miles or so. It still is quite windy going up and down the hills. So yeah. Thank you for the question.
Okay.
Any other questions? Super.
For a helicopter, Carol.
I maybe,
Or
it sounds like maybe I would not be the best person to be driving on the roads, maybe.
Yes. Well, in this case, oftentimes we just fly. We travel to Darien, yes, and then instead of driving 10 hours across, we just take a 1-hour flight or 15-minute drive flight, domestic flight.
Mhm.
It's beautiful Caribbean islands and pelagics and all that, tropic birds, boobies, you name it. Good to see you, Anna and Eric. Good to see you all, everybody. I'm not sure if you have any other
Thanks so
questions.
much, Guido.
I've got one more.
Otherwise- Yes, please go.
You mentioned building the small field station at the land in the Darien. Have you added on to that? Do you house visitors in that area? I know some people must know because they've been there, but
Yes, yes. Yes, we have. Actually, Jonathan here has helped us in the past, actually literally build one of the field stations. But yes, we have right now about 7 rooms, and we've accommodated groups as many as 25 college kids. Mhm.
okay.
Which is, go ahead.
Guido, it's Bonnie again.
Yes,
You haven't
Bonnie.
told anyone anything about your other field station that you have in Suburbia. I mean,
Oh,
I
here
was-
in Gamboa?
yes, you need to talk about Gamboa because I was so fascinated by those young people doing their different projects.
Sure. Well, not only in the Darien, but also we have a field station here in Gamboa near the canal, near the famous Canopy Tower. We have a field station where we normally host local biologists, young biologists, and also from the US and abroad, working with Smithsonian, because we're so conveniently located right next to the rainforest that they really like to come and stay here and work in the rainforest. Like right now, Josue Ortega, who's a local biologist, is tracking coatis, and he doesn't even have to go anywhere. He already put a GPS transmitter on him, and he's got a little antenna, and he just puts it outside his room, and he collects all the data of where the coatis have been moving. So it's very convenient, and of course, it's nothing fancy by any means, but it's perfectly accessible to folks that want to come bird watching and don't want to pay a fortune to stay at some of the brand name hotels or lodges. You can stay here for a fraction of the price and see we have about 200 species in the yard. So it's always cool to see trogons and toucans off your balcony or your room. It's very nice. Thanks, Bunny, for pointing that out. So again, at Adopta Bosque is our handle for social media, or adoptabosque.org. If you can go online, I think Jonathan posted it in the chat. So if you have any further questions, I'll be happy to answer them online. Or if you want to have another, hopefully I get to visit you folks sometime in the near future, or otherwise you can come to Panama and visit us here. If you have any other questions, I'll be happy. Otherwise, I'll let you guys go. I know there's some people from the East Coast that are very tired.
And some people from Panama who might be a little tired.
No worries.
Thank you, Guido.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a good night. Sleep well.
Oh,
Thank you,
Happy New Year.
Guido. Take care. Thank
do we
you.
know your email?